Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Healing and Freedom Journey. I am Mark DeJesus, a brother from another mother, bringing you insights to help you in your journey to experience greater mental, emotional, and relationship health. Today, what I want to get into is a very tough and challenging subject, but one I think needs to be tackled with grace, with compassion, but also with helpful insight, because many people have been affected by this. And in fact, we are living under the influence of the culture of narcissism. And I want to talk about how Christians can experience healing from a narcissist relationship. And this can take on various forms. You can be raised by one. You can work with one. You can have one that you find out your friend is one. This can hit in a bunch of different areas. And I really want to uncover this more and more because it hits at the root system of what has influenced many people's upbringing and some of their most challenging relationship struggles. Now, when it comes to narcissism, it's important to realize that there is the influence of narcissism. It's on a spectrum. It can get into the extreme version of what is called narcissistic personality disorder. You can see that in the DSM-5, the psychological mental health manual that kind of lays out what that looks like. And there's also help in understanding narcissistic tendencies. And I personally believe that all of us can benefit from seeing narcissistic tendencies to go, I'm going to be aware of that, not to spin and spiral and panic and the world is coming to an end because I'm a narcissist, but instead just soberly being aware. But what I really want to get into is you've been under the impact of a narcissist in pretty significant ways. What do you do? And how do you begin the healing process? There are two resources I want to first recommend that I think are important to recognize. One is a series that I did called What is Love? And involved in that was what love looks like. And there were episodes that I called What Love Does Not Look Like. This was based on 1 Corinthians 13. And I give a little bit of the history of narcissism in that term and explaining what it is, get into some questions that people often ask in the subject. And I bring out 5 basic components of narcissism and how it influences. Then there's another resource I just recently did in a live broadcast. My wife and I have Sunday night lives where it is a live event that we love sharing with our community. Within that, I did a very important biblical talk and looking through the biblical history of narcissism and its impact. And then I narrowed in on Paul's exhortation because he gives warnings. He gives a pretty intense warning about the impact of narcissism and to be aware of it. You can go ahead and check that out and allow that to help you in your own discernment and your own processing of this subject. So let me just give 5 traits to be aware of. This can certainly, there could be 7. There's some people that say there's 14. And many of them, they all create great contributions. I just want to narrow down into 5 things that these can branch out into most of the characteristics that people talk about. One being, a narcissist is always the center of attention. They are constantly bringing the attention back to the highly constructed image of themselves that they hold to maintain. It may look like they're always perfect or they always have it together. It can also be where they're the greatest victor or the greatest victim, depending on where it lands in their life and their journey. But it's a me monster that has gotten so far out of control and it drives everything in their life. The second thing that ties into it is because of that, they don't show any interest in your life. They're not others focused in a healthy way. They, when you talk to them, whatever subject you're talking about goes back to them, back to what they're going through, and they don't have the ability to really shine the light on you. And so when you walk away from them, you're more spinning about them and spinning about yourself. People that are healthy, when you walk away, you should in some ways feel refreshed, loved, connected, and you in many ways can feel more edified about yourself. A narcissist wants you to really think about them and the attention to be on them. Third is they have a sense of entitlement. And they feel that entitlement causes them to live in what they deserve because they think they're better than others. They think that they have an elitist world. Maybe they're the most elite. They've had the worst journey in their life. They're the elite of the worst journey. Or maybe everything they do is wonderful and their motives are great and everything they do is excellent. And they're always serving that agenda to point to that. They're entitled where they feel entitled to do things that are sinful, that are wrong. And it ties into number 4, they lack empathy and remorse. They often don't get counseling or get help or even look to help because it causes them to have to face themselves. They lack empathy in their relationships. So all relationships flow out of healthy empathy. They don't have remorse of how they treat others or what they've done or being aware of how their life has affected other people negatively so that they can humbly take responsibility in a healthy way. And the last one is they gaslight. And this is the big danger because their life influences other people in a way that twists and distorts their version of reality. If you're around a narcissist long enough, they get you to believe a world of reality that is not true. But it's one they've cultivated based on making sure they look good, making sure that they don't have to deal with stuff in their own life, to weave it in a certain way. And that leaves people very, very significantly damaged. So I'm going to get more into like healing from some of these traits. I'm going to do some videos on how do you heal from lack of empathy? How do you heal from, right? But today what I want to do is get into the overall plan of action because narcissism it hides easily in the church. Sometimes it's very easy to see because stage platforms really give room for narcissists because it's a lot of attention, there's a lot of affirmation from the state, so it becomes a vacuum. I really believe churches should have a filtering process to when they raise up leaders, they need to keep an eye out for this because this is these are very dangerous traits. But they're not just in the platform, they're amongst us. You know, the Bible talks about wolves in sheep's clothing. They work and can do rogue movement, and they can create not just division, but they create power struggles in games and how they influence people in the shadows of the community. I see narcissism a lot in marriages. That's where you often see it, where many churches historically have told spouses, oh, just go back and love your spouse. And we tolerated abuse and we didn't call it out. And unfortunately, the church historically has many times told people to go back and tolerate abuse in the name of love, saying, well, that's loving them. And we just want to avoid divorce. So in the avoidance of divorce, we never dealt with issues and we never got real about what's really going on. So many narcissists have gone undetected and have left a trail of damage behind them that they never take responsibility for. In fact, what they do is they often portray that they were the victim in many of these situations. Sometimes when you look back historically, whether it's in the church or outside the church, you can see that many narcissists, we just called them jerks. You know, behind the scenes, they were just jerks. That's kind of the term, the sophisticated term that we would use. And what we're describing is somebody with no empathy or remorse. We all have moments where we can act, unempathetic or like a jerk, but healthy people recognize it and go, and many people struggle with too much sense of like, oh, I did this wrong. They go so guilt and so shame. Narcissists, their shame drives them to be disconnected. They don't even connect to responsibility for their life or their actions in healthy and fruitful ways. So what I'm going to share with you is something for those that want to roll up their sleeves, get honest with their journey. And you're like, I want to work on some stuff because you may be at a place of realizing, okay, I may be in a situation or I recognize in my upbringing, narcissism was there. Here's some things I want to bring to your attention. This is not going to be easy, but it's for those that are saying, I'm willing to take the steps. First, I'm going to recommend to you, develop awareness and understanding. What do I mean by this? Just learn and be aware of what narcissism is. It may be helpful in my biblical approach. You may find some psychological articles that help bring out the patterns. You may see certain examples. There's many people out there that have written some great things on it. I've had my share of reading many, many different books. Some of them many of them repeat the same thing over and over again. And that's okay, because many times we need the repetition. But it takes time. It takes time for us to recognize narcissism and also to see how it's affected our life, how it's affected us. And so when you, for example, have been raised by a narcissist or two narcissists, you've been living your whole life adapting to it and just trying to survive. And so it takes time to learn. Now, this isn't something to go condemn everyone, nor is it like anyone who annoys you, they're a narcissist. Sometimes we throw out that term so quickly, not realizing it's a cluster of things. It's not just, oh, someone seems selfish or someone's stubborn. We just throw out narcissism, or they want attention. We go, oh, they're narcissists, right? Again, there's tendencies throughout the world in our lives and what we could all benefit from healing. When you recognize things, here's something I want to suggest to you. Beware of the pressure of trying to convince people around you. Because that's what happens. The light dawns on you. You realize maybe growing up, your dad was a narcissist, and you're like, oh my, it's starting to click, the things I struggled with. So you want to convince everyone in the family, dad's a narcissist. Be aware of that. Treat your healing journey as a treasure, and don't take that, as the Bible says, the pearl and throw it before swine, meaning those that are not going to recognize the treasure of your heart and what you're working through. I know that many, they want to go on social media now, and they just want to like preach to everybody, and they need to make room and to treasure their healing and not necessarily have to convince everyone, right? Now, you may have to talk it out with a counselor or someone you trust or someone who gets your journey and what you're working through to get some feedback. That's fine. But just wanted to throw that out there. We also, as Christians, have to push past many shallow mindsets, because Christians will see a toxic situation and go, oh, just love them. Oh, just love them. Don't let it bother you. There's a classic one. Just forgive and move on, right? We don't realize that a lot of that language is actually codependent language. It's calling evil good. It is glossing over things that actually need to be addressed. And they might say, oh, just look at the good, right? Don't just look at the, right? When in reality, what's happening is abusive and even sinful. And sometimes we're afraid to get messy. So as Christians, we just gloss over and give people quick answers because we're afraid of dealing with stuff in our life. And I think God wants us to be able to, in love and grace and patience, but be able to go, we got to work through some things here. So the first stage is important. It's just develop awareness. It's like, don't hyperventilate. Don't feel like you got to be an expert overnight. It's just let yourself learn. No one has like at the beginning, like just, this, I have this perfect picture of what I'm dealing with. You kind of learn, as you go, and allow yourself to have the learning process. Now, this is where the next one's going to get tough for the Christian world. And I'll tell you in a second why. But number two is you have to recognize they will not change. They will not change. This is the danger of narcissism, is they have a hard heart, they have pride, they have stubbornness, and they're entitled to their sinful ways. They practice them and at times promote them, and it becomes abusive to other people. And it is so dangerous in what a narcissist does to children in their upbringing. It's abusive in how it impacts children and how it impacts adults. And many times in the Christian community, we looked at abuse in a way of like just constantly allowing it and saying it's okay and not knowing how to establish boundaries. Okay. Now, they're not going to change because they don't admit they're wrong. They don't humble themselves. They may have a Saul getting thrown off his horse, Paul experience, but that's not going to happen because of something you need to do to convince them. Because we're going to need to take a journey. You're going to need to let go because there's a lot of toxic patterns you've been tied into. We have to recognize, we say, well, as Christians, how can we say that they're not going to change? Well, God resists the proud. If there's a chronic pride issue, God says, you don't have a devil problem. We have a problem, because he says, I resist you. Our grace just pours to the humble that are willing to recognize and humble themselves. I need to learn. I recognize I've got flaws. I've got sins. I've got failures, mistakes. I see it. And your grace is here. And I allow myself in vulnerability to heal, but the pride are self-protected. The proud are self-protected. And, if you don't recognize this step, you are going to constantly be in patterns where you need to convince them, to convince others. Or you keep going, maybe if I do this, things will help, and you'll keep exhausting yourself. So step number 3 is actually a repetition of 2, because I need to bring this point home. You need to accept they will not change. It's going to be one thing to recognize it. It's a whole different process to actually accept it, because once you accept it, it will actually empower you to move towards the decisions you need to make. Because many times we hang around the narcissist vortex hoping they will change and convince. I've spent hours trying to convince. I've spent hours trying one more thing, trying another discussion or this thing. I've spent hours and hours, endless energy. And I had to realize I've got to not only recognize, I've got to accept, because then you'll accept that you're not going to get what you need in this relationship anyways. And we're going to need to help you unglue to the dysfunctional ties that you have to this person to try to be better, to try to do better. And when you accept that they won't change, and you can even go, well, only God can. Now it disconnects you from having to change them. And B, it clarifies the decisions you need to make to actually move on and heal. I find acceptance, and I usually have to explain acceptance, is a very powerful experience for mental health, because it allows us to see things for what they are and no longer get entangled in another thing we need to do to try to change, another thing. And it gives us greater clarity, because we're unburdening ourselves from the toxic things that we carry. And this takes time, because many of you are like drug addicts to the codependent circle with the narcissist, and it takes time to untangle from that. So that leads us to number 4. Now it's time for you to start working on yourself. And many of us have to untie ourselves from the drama, because dealing with a narcissist creates constant drama. There's constant phone calls and emails and texts and this thing's happening, that thing's happening, right? It's just a lot of drama. If you have a lot of drama in your life, 2 things I look for: addictions, or number 2, narcissism, in effect. Because those addictions create a world and a lifestyle, and narcissism, and often they're there together within the same orbit and vortex. And when you go, okay, this is where it's at, now you got to face yourself. It's time to work on yourself. And many people that I've seen who've been under the influence of a narcissist in their upbringing, or maybe they had to move on from a spouse or relationship, and they had spent so much energy on the relationship, they actually ignored themselves. So number 5 is going to lead us to make room to work on yourself, to look at yourself compassionately, to look at yourself graciously, because most people who've been under the effect of narcissists have a very, very low sense of how they see themselves. They're very hard on themselves. They can't look at themselves compassionately, and they don't make room to even deal with themselves. And many times you have to step away from the drama of a narcissist's life, of what they cultivate. You actually often have to get away from it. We'll get to that in just a moment, to even focus on this, because otherwise you're still in the turmoil of trying another thing, right? And a resource that I would recommend that I think could be helpful in this process is God Loves Me and I Love Myself. Because people come to me and go, I'm married to a narcissist. Okay, and I'm not here to go, okay, you need to do this, or you need to leave him, or you need to get out of it, or hey, I grew up in this, or I have this. What I first want to do is I want to shine the light of God's love and compassion over your life. And that was very, very helpful for me to begin to, because I would live in dysfunctional patterns out of narcissist-connected relationships or people that influenced my life in narcissistic ways. I was always very harsh on myself and had a very, very intense inner critic that would shout out and drove my life. And so narcs, they leave you with a distorted picture of yourself. You don't even know how to see yourself. So you respond to life with something's wrong with me, something's wrong with me, I did something wrong. So in the healing process, it's time to actually learn how to relate to God and how to relate to yourself in a new way. And it may be recognizing you have needs and being tender and kind to those needs. This process of looking at yourself compassionately leads to a concept of reparenting yourself. Because many of you, when you notice in your journey, there are neglected aspects to your journey where you might be this age in these areas of your life, but there's certain areas where you're afraid, you're angry, you spiral. Those are often immature, untended to areas of your heart that need reparenting. And how do you reparent? Well, you start to look at yourself in those struggles to realize, oh, this is me at 10 years old. This is me, and still in adolescence, needing love and needing, what does it look like if I acted towards myself in that way? Because that's who God is in our lives. As born-again believers, he started us over. You're going to be a baby, be born again, and be grown up again. And that's a process of learning who God is as a father, as a loving father. And recognizing what that love is and learning to see that love in an empowering way. Because then when we start loving ourselves the way God loves us, it empowers us to make powerful decisions. Many people want to know the decision. Mark, what should I do for this situation? And I often recommend you got to start working on yourself, because love actually opens up for the decisions that need to be made. And I talk about that one of the chapters in God Loves Me and Love Myself. Because when you establish a more loving relationship in how you do life and how you grow and how you heal, how you see yourself, we then move into, now this leads to practicing healthy boundaries. We often want to learn how to do the boundaries when we don't have a connection to love. Love is what establishes boundaries. Narcissists do not respond well to boundaries. So as soon as you start to establish one, it kicks up all of their traits and their activities and what they do to manipulate relationships. But you're going to have to learn how to establish firm boundaries. And this is very biblical. Paul the Apostle gave a very black and white boundary. He said, stay away from these people. When he described a narcissist in 2 Timothy chapter 3 and in the perilous times, and he lists out basically what a narcissist will be and their effect. So it's actually very hard to heal from narcissism and its effect on you in relationship unless you get away. I have to bring you the straight truth in that, because it's going to take some time to process out. Now, what this looks like, because people automatically go, oh, it has to be no contact for everybody. Not necessarily, and this is where you may need a little bit of coaching or may need some feedback, but really at the end of the day, the decisions yourself is yours, and it needs to be done out of a place of healthy love. There may be a friend where it's time to move on. It's just time to move on because you see the traits and you keep staying in their orbit. It's a ministry relationship that you need to move on from. When it comes to parents, there's kind of a spectrum of what that looks like. Some, you cannot even be around them because they are militant about their dysfunction. It attacks you when they're with you. Right? Then there's those that have narcissism at work, but you can be around with them maybe in this setting or in that. You have to establish the boundary where you can allow yourself room to heal. And you can allow that space to process grieving, process working through your emotions, and being kind to yourself. That makes sense? Or the people that, I can even find this in ministry when people come to you for help, right? And I have spent a lot of time in ministry sessions, coaching, counseling type of settings where I needed to, in my mind, go, Mark, you don't have to do anything about this. You don't have to do anything about this. Seeing the narcissist discernment has helped free me a lot. But it took some time to entangling it. And one of the things you have to do is you have to learn to let go of toxic guilt. When you are in a relationship or influenced by narcissism, and I find this in Christianity a lot, is we often see guilt as love. We confuse it. So we do a lot of things of, I feel bad, or maybe if I did this, maybe if I just one more time, if I just did this, but Mark, I need to be loving, but I need to be compassionate. And maybe God could change them. Well, let's look at how Jesus interacted. We want to say, what would Jesus do? The Pharisees manifest a lot of narcissism. How did he interact with them? Was he going, oh, my bad, guys. Oh, maybe if I do this one more thing. Fully loved, fully compassionate. But he's like, I ain't got no time for this hard-heartedness, fake show, baloney nonsense that keeps showing up as though it's some self-righteous superiority, that you have some religious, it's just a form. There's no power to change lives behind it. Ain't nobody got time for this. So you're going to have to learn how to navigate through, because when you often step away from a narcissist, you will feel a lot of guilt. You'll feel it. And they will use that guilt to prey on you. And if you realize that you've done a lot of things in life out of guilt, it may be helpful to go, have I been under the influence of narcissistic relationships in my upbringing by my parents or those who were heavily influencing my life? Because we got to move out of a lifestyle of doing everything out of I feel bad. This is something I want to release believers from, left and right. God's relationship with us is not based on us doing things out of feeling bad. That doesn't build a long-standing, fruitful relationship. It's only going to be chasing disturbance. And don't we do that a lot with God? We do that a lot with people. I want to take you off the guilt trip. That's going to take some time. And so number 8 is an important one, because narcissists need a codependent relationship. They need to feel in a place of superiority, and they need to keep you in their orbit. Maybe they're the greatest victor, or maybe they're the greatest victim. Either way, they keep you in an orbit of that dynamic. And you'll have to learn. Many I know even go to recovery groups specifically on codependency, and it's great. I think Christians could really benefit from codependent relationships. If I was a pastor today, well, in the sense of like a traditional church, institutional church setting, I would probably make it a, hey, you want to be a leader here and do things, you got to go through codependency. We're gonna learn that here, because churches operate in codependency. We demand certain things in codependency, right? And our relationship to narcissists has reinforced that. So you're gonna have to untie yourself, because you have ungodly ties. You can call it soul ties. You could call it codependency. Many of the teachings around soul ties or codependency have a lot of overlap. And so because relationally they echo in your head, they leave an echo in your head. You can even walk away and it's a year later, 2 years later, and they're still talking here, right? Because you're untying that. So now, as you make the steps you need to make for boundaries, and you're working through these things, beware that as you try to break free, the self-pity, the victim games, and the gaslighting will want to increase. Self-pity meaning maybe you have one of those last conversations or something happens, and you're like, okay, I can't do this anymore. They take situations and point it at themselves. Remember, everything's about them and how hard it is for their life. Whenever you expose a narcissist, I'm not encouraging you to have to dive in and expose a narcissist. But when it does happen, many of you have seen this, they go deep into pity about themselves. Meanwhile, what you're talking about is not them as much as how their life has affected you. And they make it all about them. Or they go hard victim. Just my life, nothing right. That's their survival mechanism. They go from like this fabricated victor to then a victim. And then they want to get out of that as quickly as they can, but they're going to pull you into that victim mindset. Meanwhile, they're gaslighting. They're interpreting things that have happened in ways that are infused with lies. And it creates a picture that leads them out of repentance. I always find that in a situation where there's conflict, where the whole story is only about one person, where it's like one person telling the other person without all of us humbling ourselves. That's how healing happens. We all humble ourselves. It's no like it's It's only one person who's got an issue and none of us do. It's all of us humbling ourselves. But there's a gaslighting work that will keep them from ever having to deal with themselves. Now, the ultimate healing posture, I'm just going to give you a quick picture of what the healing posture is. And so I've learned what I call practicing watching a movie. Now, when you go and watch a movie, you may see the movie, you may even be emotionally stirred, right? But when you think about the narcissist, or if this is somebody that you can interact with, but it's only every now and then, the healthiest way to do it is like you're watching a movie. You notice their traits, you notice how they're acting, but you're not getting charged and wrapped into it. Just like you watch a movie, oh, it was great. You might see it, you might even feel the emotion, but when the movie's over, you may move on, and you move on with life, right? Many of us get caught into the movie. Now we're in the character. We're tied in to the movie, right? And so I found myself going, whoa, I got wrapped up into the movie. And it takes practice. This is not something you're going to do overnight. This takes a lot of practice of being compassionate to yourself. And so what you do is you practice noticing their behavior without any responsibility on your behalf to fix it, argue with it, get entangled with it, debate with it. You notice it. I think there's something very powerful in when Jesus' ministry that didn't cause him to get hooked up into everybody and their accusations. He'd be able to see it. Almost kind of like, look at that accusation. Oh, look at that thought. Look at that they're presenting to me without, oh, what does that mean about me? Well, I got to defend myself. Right? And this is what we do. We get entangled in all this strife because narcissists bring a world of strife with them. They're not interested in healing. And that's a big signal. They're not interested in healing. Because when we're interested in healing, we humble ourselves and we're reasonable. And that's what I want to cultivate in your healing process. Is you become a reasonable person who's willing to humble themselves. But when you get entangled in a narcissist world, ain't going to happen. So what was helpful for you in this process for your journey? If this was a blessing, would you click like and subscribe? Go to markdejesus.com where you can find more resources and materials. In fact, there is a topics button you can hit right at the top of the page that will let you go to a whole library of materials that are going to help you. Currently, I'm in a series and doing some teachings on narcissism, and there'll be a tab there that you can find for that. If this was a blessing, consider a one-time donation or become a monthly donor to support these broadcasts. It'd be such a blessing. You can also get books. You can also join the Healing and Freedom community, which is available now. If you go, I want to make an investment into next step, into help for my life and for my journey, you can check that out today. Well, it's been a great privilege to be able to share these materials and resources with you as a brother from another mother in your life and in your journey. Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, I'll be back with some more insights and more materials and tools for your healing and freedom journey. It took me a second to get all that out. Your healing and freedom journey. But in the meantime, you know what I'm going to say. I'm out.